Assalamu alaikum everyone, and a very warm welcome to another session of Ask Dr. Saleem. Here you can bring your questions about Islam, Quran, or a Hadith, and you may ask them in either English or Urdu, but the answers will be given in English so that we may reach a wider array of audience. And to ask your questions, you may raise your hand or type them in the chat. And if you'd like to stay anonymous, you can send them directly to me in the chat. And so with that, let's start off with Sulaiman Ahmed. Please go ahead.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम डॉक्टर साहब, मेरा सवाल ये है कि कुरान शरीफ में अल्लाह ताला ने कहा है वन तुब्दू मा फी अनफुसिकुम औ तुख्फूहु युहासिबकुम बिल्लाह, और जो कुछ तुम्हारे दिलों में है उसे चाहे छुपाओ या ज़ाहिर करो, अल्लाह ताला तुमसे इसका हिसाब ले लेगा। तो इससे एक स्कॉलर ने ये तशरीह की थी कि जो कुछ आपको गंदे ख्यालात या बुरे ख्यालात आते हैं ना, उसके बारे में अल्लाह ताला आपसे हिसाब लेंगे, मगर एक रिवायत है जिसमें कि आपको जो बुरे ख्यालात आते हैं उस पे अल्लाह ताला मुहासबा नहीं करेगा। तो एक तो ये डिफरेंस क्यों है? और अगर इस आयत के हवाले से देखा जाए कि आपसे मुहासबा होगा, तो जैसा कि आपने पिछली बार आपसे मैंने पूछा था मास्टरबेशन के बारे में, तो आपने कहा था कि इज हलाल। तो वो उन स्कॉलर ने ये कहा था कि अगर मास्टरबेशन हलाल है तो आदमी जब मास्टरबेशन की तरफ जाता है तो ज़ाहिरी बात है उसको बुरे ख्यालात आते हैं। तो इस आयत की रोशनी से देखा जाए तो वो कैसे हलाल है? और दूसरा, आपने कहा था कि ये बात ठीक है कि कुरान और हदीस में इसकी इजाजत नहीं दी गई, मगर ये भी है कि कुरान और हदीस में इससे किसी जगह पे मना भी नहीं किया गया। तो मना ना करना कैसे दलील बन जाती है हलाल होने की? और वो जो इब्ने अब्बास वाली रिवायत थी कि उनसे एक शख्स ने आकर कहा था कि मैंने हाथ से ये काम किया है, तो उन्होंने भी यही कहा था कि इससे बेहतर निकाह था, मगर ये जिना से बेहतर है। तो उन स्कॉलर ने कहा था कि इससे यही पता चलता है कि एटलीस्ट गुनाह तो वो है ना, इसीलिए उन्होंने कहा था इससे बेहतर निकाह था। तो इस पे थोड़ा एक्सप्लेन कर दें।
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So you have asked this question that what about the thoughts that we have in our mind? Will we be held accountable for the thoughts that we have? Of course, referring to thoughts which are not good, evil thoughts. And you have cited the example of someone who has said that yes, you will be held accountable for your thoughts that come into your mind. But then, of course, the question arises that all these thoughts are not advertent. I mean, they are not out of your own intention. These thoughts come to you. So the Quran is absolutely clear that anything which is not intentional, you shall not be held accountable for that. Only things which become intentional, in which you entertain a thought, in which you prolong it, in which you start to plan according to that thought, then the Quran says that even if the act that you are planning is not executed, you will be held accountable for that. So in tubdu ma fi anfusikum aw tukhfuhu yuhasibkum billah, which means that whether you hide something or whether you don't hide and it's apparent, God will take you into account. Actually refers to those things that are in your intention, and it's not just they are thoughts that come randomly, but they are thoughts that you plan, and you plan to execute them, you plan to act according to them. So thoughts which come to you randomly, which come to you without any intention, you shall not be held accountable for them. This is the answer to your first part. The second thing that you have asked is what about self-pleasure or masturbation, because people often are engulfed with some thoughts which are not necessarily pure thoughts. They are impure thoughts. So again, the question is that that imagination is something which comes to you at times not out of your own willful thinking. It could arrive, it could come to you because of as you can clearly see that during this act of lust, it's difficult to restrain yourself. So if you are able to restrain yourself and maybe think about, for example, your own wife or maybe someone who's imaginary, then I don't think that there's any problem. It's only when you think about someone specific who might exist in the real world that this could be thought to be accountable for, that a person will be held accountable for that. And thirdly, as you have said, that as far as self-pleasure or self-gratification or masturbation is concerned, if it's not allowed in the Quran and it's not even proscribed in the Quran, then at least what is the argument that as per which we say that it is not disallowed? So the simple thing is that in matters in which we have not been disallowed, especially in such cases, then there is no question of prohibiting them. It's a question of person choice. It's a question of person preference. It could be viewed in light of other important details, like, for example, indulgence in various things, and at the same time, not being able to marry, of course, which is at the right time, which of course is something which comes to a person naturally, and these desires are something which build up in your own self, and at times you just cannot control them. So if you are asked to do nothing about them, of course, then nocturnal emission is the right answer. But at times, nocturnal emissions are not sufficient, because during the daytime, people are at times they are overwhelmed with these thoughts. So if they release themselves, we find nothing at all against this practice in the Quran and Sunnah. As far as Abdullah ibn Abbas's opinion is concerned, that is just an opinion which is attributed to him. We don't even know whether it's correctly ascribed to him. And at the same time, we know that there are other Sahaba which did not actually say anything. In fact, if I remember correctly, Abdullah ibn Abbas's another opinion which is ascribed to him is that he is reported to have said that this is like your water, and if you just ejaculate your water, there's no harm in it. So you see, the opinions of the Sahaba, they vary from person to person, and at the same time also we need to understand whether they have been properly handed out to us or not, or handed down to us. But the primary thing that has to be understood is that something has to be prohibited, and there is no clear prohibition either in the Quran or in the Hadith literature regarding self-gratification.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. We'll move on to a question in the chat that asks, is it okay to keep a parrot in a cage? Because previously you mentioned that keeping anything in a cage is inappropriate, but however, there's a hadith where the Prophet joked with a little boy, to cheer him up, who used to own a pet bird that died. So could you please clarify about this?
Well, as far as the narrative is concerned, that has to be viewed according to its own merits and details, and it needs to be looked up. I'm not aware of any such narrative. If you can send me that narrative, I'll take a look at it and give you my opinion. But other than that, according to the established principles of religion and norms of reason and common sense, it is something which is apparent that if you are trying to imprison some bird or some animal in a place which is not according to its own habitat, then of course you are confining him or that bird or that animal into a specific area, which is of course like a prison to that animal. And because of the fact that it cannot defend itself, it cannot speak for its own self, all it can do is just acknowledge whatever you do with him or with it. So I think that this is something that we need to think and rethink, that caging animals, especially when the habitat is not their natural habitat. There are instances in which you are able to cage animals, not exactly cage them, but keep them in a habitat which is close to their habitat. For example, if you go to safaris in safari parks, you have lions or other animals. They are roaming around in a very wide space, which could be perhaps closer to their own habitat. But the bottom line is that, you see, it's for our own personal pleasure, for our own personal entertainment, that we are confining animals. We are not properly giving them their natural and surrounding and environment. And that is something which I think we need to revisit and rethink. I, for one, do think that this amounts to oppression. It amounts to a violation of animal rights. And also, I think that if something has to be done in order to bring those animals, to domesticate them and bring them closer to humankind so that they can view them, then we have to adopt measures in which these animals are kept in a habitat, in an environment which is a replica of their original environment.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Harun Shahroom, please go ahead.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम सर।
वालेकुम अस्सलाम।
सर, मैं एक ऐसी कंपनी में काम करता हूँ जहाँ पे शूज़ और लेदर की प्रोडक्शन होती है, और बेसिकली मेरा काम वो शूज़ बनाना है। पर वो कंपनी जब इन शूज़ की एडवर्टाइजमेंट करती है तब, और उस कंपनी की वेबसाइट पर भी कुछ कुफ्र के अल्फाज इस्तेमाल करते हैं, या फिर यूं कह लूँ कि वो इस्लाम की टीचिंग से अलग है। क्योंकि मैं इटली में रहता हूँ और ये क्रिश्चियन है। और तो सर, मेरा क्वेश्चन ये था कि मेरे लिए ऐसी कंपनी में काम करना जायज़ होगा, क्योंकि कंपनी कहीं ना कहीं लोगों को भी एक अलग इस्लाम से अलग मैसेज दे रही होती है, तो मेरे लिए ऐसी कंपनी में काम करना जायज़ होगा?
Okay, so your question relates to a factory in which you work in. You produce leather shoes, and you are living in Italy, and you think that the production of those shoes, once they are produced, they are perhaps the way they are advertised is something which brings in certain features which might not be in consonance with your religious teachings. So my understanding here, and my view here, is that personally you are not involved in this in any way, because all that you're doing is you are earning through the manufacturing of those shoes. So you're like a worker who's doing his own job in that company or in that factory in production. Now, as far as anything which they add to that shoe, for example, any element which is not according to religion, which is not according to what your own views are, you are not accountable for that. They themselves are accountable for that, because you are not doing something in itself which is forbidden. All that you are doing is, if I have understood you correctly, you are manufacturing those shoes, and your role stops after that. So anything which goes beyond that, or anything which comes into play after that, is not your responsibility.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Shabnam, please go ahead.
थैंक यू मारिया। सर, मेरा क्वेश्चन स्लेवरी के बारे में है। सर, जैसे कि वी नो कि अल्लाह ताला ने कुरान पाक में गालिबन सूरह मोहम्मद में वो एक आयत नाजिल की थी जिसमें जंगी कैदियों के बारे में इंस्ट्रक्शंस थी कि उन्हें या फिदिया लेकर या एहसान के तौर पे छोड़ दिया जाए। तो सर, लेकिन हम प्रैक्टिकली जब हिस्टोरिकली देखते हैं तो हजरत एक जितना मुझे नो हाउ है कि कहा जाता है कि हजरत उमर के दौर तक जितनी जंगें हुई, इवन प्रॉफिट के दौर में भी मेरा ख्याल है गज़वा खैबर में मुझे याद है हजरत सफिया आई थी, और फिर हजरत अबू बकर के दौर में भी, और कहा जाता है कि प्रैक्टिकली इसको एलिमिनेट हजरत उमर ने किया। तो सर, क्या सहाबा इसको इम्प्लीमेंट नहीं कर सके, इसको समझ नहीं सके? तो काइंडली ये थोड़ा सा गाइड।
So I think I'll refer you to an article that I have written on this topic, in which I have shown that in the times of the rightly guided caliphate, specifically, and especially in the times of the Prophet himself, how this directive was very, very strictly adhered to. And I've picked up all the possible examples, like, for example, the famous battle of Banu Mustaliq, and some of the other battles in which women were captured as prisoners, and they were distributed amongst the army. Whether this actually took place or not, or what exactly is the nature of this distribution, I'll refer you to that article, and hopefully Mariam will give you the link of that article, in which all these instances have been compiled and shown that this directive was strictly adhered to. It was only after the rightly guided caliphate, or maybe sometime during it, that this deviation started. Otherwise, in the time of the Prophet, this never happened.
राइट सर, थैंक यू वेरी मच सर। सर, ये लिंक मिल जाएगा, लिंक
Yeah.
आपके आर्टिकल। जी, थैंक यू सर।
Shabnam, why don't you reach out to me on WhatsApp? If you don't have
Okay.
my number, I'll share it with you in the chat, and then I'll forward it to you from Dr. Saleem.
ओके, थैंक यू वेरी मच। थैंक यू मारिया।
No problem. Dr. Saleem, we have another question in the chat that asks, how far do you need to go when you're washing your face during wudu? Do you need to include the sideburns and also above the sideburns, or like up until the hairline? For someone with OCD, it could be particularly difficult to, maintain consistency and have that peace of mind.
Right. So you see, you just need to wash your face. I mean, the words of the Quran are that you need to wash your face. Yeah, and that is a general directive. For example, you just need to splash some water over your face, and just there's nothing which has been mentioned in which you have to go into such minute details as to visualize whether some part has been left dry or not. That's not your concern. It should be a general understanding that you're just splashing water on your face and you're just cleaning it. So wherever that water goes, and we know our face is the frontal part of our brain, the upper structure of our body. So that is all. I mean, you don't need to go into much more details. It's just that you just need to splash water on your face and just wash it properly. That's it.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. Saqib Khan, you're up next. Please go ahead.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम सर। मेरा सवाल तकफीर से मुताल्लिक है। अल्लाह ताला कुरान मजीद में इरशाद फरमाते हैं कि وَمَن لَّمْ يَحْكُم بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْكَافِرُونَ. تو اس پر محترم غامدی صاحب نے یہ فرمایا تھا کہ اس سے مراد عند اللہ کافر ہے، جبکہ آیت میں تو نہ عند اللہ کافر کے الفاظ ہیں اور نہ عند الانسان کافر کے الفاظ ہیں. تو میں سمجھنا یہ چاہ رہا تھا کہ وہ کون سا پروسیس ہے کہ جس سے گزرنے کے بعد یہ معلوم ہوتا ہے کہ یہ یہاں مراد عند اللہ کافر ہے، کیونکہ قرآن مجید میں اور بھی بہت ساری جگہوں پر ہم الظالمون ہم الفاسقون کے الفاظ آئے ہیں. تو اس پر ذرا وضاحت فرما دیں، اور اگر جواب اردو میں ممکن ہو تو بڑی مہربانی ہوگی.
اچھا، میں آپ کو اردو میں جواب دے دیتا ہوں. آپ کا سوال یہ ہے کہ وَمَن لَّمْ يَحْكُم بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْكَافِرُونَ میں جو الفاظ ہیں وہ تو یہ بتا رہے ہیں کہ جو اللہ تعالیٰ کے حکم کے مطابق فیصلہ نہیں کرتے وہ کافر ہیں. تو یہ کیسے پتہ لگا کہ یہ یہاں پہ ہم ان لوگوں کی تکفیر نہیں کر رہے، جبکہ جو ہماری رائے ہے وہ تو یہ ہے کہ یہاں پہ کافرون سے مراد خدا کے نزدیک کافر ہیں. تو دیکھیں اس میں دو چیزیں ہیں جو آپ کو مدد کریں گی رائے قائم کرنے میں. ایک تو سیاق و سباق ہے. اگر آپ سیاق و سباق اٹھا کے دیکھیں گے جس طریقے سے یہ آیات آ رہی ہیں، وہاں پہ اصل میں کسی طرف یہ بتایا نہیں جا رہا کہ وہ دنیاوی طور پہ ان کی تکفیر کی جا رہی ہے، بلکہ وہ یہ بتایا جا رہا ہے کہ ان کا جو اخروی انجام ہے وہ کیا ہوگا. اور میرے سامنے اس وقت وہ آیتیں نہیں ہیں، لیکن اگر آپ کو میں یہ کہوں کہ آپ ایک مرتبہ پھر اس پیراگراف کو شروع سے پڑھ لیں تو آپ کو یہ اندازہ ہو جائے گا کہ یہاں پہ جو بتایا جا رہا ہے، اہل کتاب کو بھی مخاطب کیا جا رہا ہے اور مسلمانوں کو بھی مختلف پیرائے میں کیا جا رہا ہے. وہاں یہ بتایا جا رہا ہے کہ خداوند تعالیٰ نے جو قانون آپ کے لیے نازل کیا تھا وہ تو یہ تھا کہ آپ نے اس کی پیروی کرنی ہے، اور اگر آپ اس کی پیروی نہیں کریں گے تو پھر آپ کا حشر جو ہے وہ وہی ہوگا کہ جو کفار کا حشر ہوتا ہے. دوسری بات جو امپورٹنٹ ہے وہ یہ ہے کہ دیکھیے پورے قرآن میں اس کے الٹ باتیں موجود ہیں، اور وہ یہ ہے کہ اللہ تعالیٰ یہ کہتے ہیں کہ تکفیر کا جو حق ہے وہ صرف میرے پاس ہے. یعنی جو بنیادی بات سمجھنے کی ہے وہ یہ ہے، خداوند تعالیٰ یہ کہتے ہیں کہ تکفیر کا حق صرف میرے پاس ہے، اور وہ اس طرح سے ہے کہ جگہ جگہ جہاں جہاں یہ ذکر آیا ہے، اگر آپ پورے قرآن کو دیکھیں وہاں اللہ تعالیٰ یہ کہتے ہیں کہ جب میرے پیغمبر میرے بہاف پہ، یعنی میری طرف سے حجت تمام کرتے ہیں، اور یعنی صرف یہ نہیں کہ دین پہنچا دیتے ہیں بلکہ حجت تمام کرتے ہیں، اور عام آدمی نہیں بلکہ پیغمبر، اس کے جواب میں اگر وہ جانتے بوجھتے انکار کرتے ہیں تو پھر ان کو کافر کہا جاتا ہے. تو یہ دوسرے جگہوں سے واضح ہے. اور اگر آپ نے خاص طور سے دیکھنا ہو تو آپ سورہ کافرون کو دیکھیں، قل یا ایھا الکافرون، یہ جو آیت ہے یہ آپ یہ دیکھیے یہ اس وقت اتری ہے کہ جب ہجرت کا موقع تھا اور پہلی مرتبہ قریش کو کفار کہا گیا. اس سے پہلے پورے کے پورے مکی دور میں ان کو کفار کا لقب اس انداز سے نہیں دیا گیا کہ جس میں یہ کہا گیا ہو کہ آپ نے حق کا جانتے بوجھتے انکار کیا ہے. تو یا ایھا الکافرون کے الفاظ پہلی مرتبہ ان کے لیے وہاں آئے ہیں جب ان پر حق واضح کر دیا گیا ہو. تو خلاصہ اس بات کا یہ ہے کہ پورے قرآن مجید میں اللہ تعالیٰ نے تکفیر کا حق اپنے پاس رکھا ہے. وہ کہتے ہیں جب میرے پیغمبر آتے ہیں تو وہ ہی جب حق کو واضح کر دیتے ہیں اور لوگ جو جانتے بوجھتے جھٹلاتے ہیں تو پھر وہ اس کے مستحق ہوتے ہیں کہ ان کو کافر کہا جائے، اور کسی کو حق حاصل نہیں ہے، اور عام لوگوں کو تو یہ بالکل ہی حق حاصل نہیں ہے. اس وجہ سے اصل بات یہ ہے. اور دوسرا میں نے عرض کیا کہ جہاں یہ سورہ مائدہ میں آیتیں آئی نہیں، اگر آپ ان کا سیاق نکال کے دیکھیں گے تو وہاں یہ کسی طور سے یہ نہیں کہا جا رہا کہ یہ جو لوگ اس وقت آپ کے سامنے کھڑے ہیں ان کی ہم نے تکفیر کر دی ہے، بلکہ یہ کہا گیا ہے کہ وہ کافر ہوں گے. اللہ تعالیٰ قیامت میں جب ان سے معاملہ کریں گے تو وہ اس بنیاد پہ کریں گے کہ انہوں نے ایک حق کو سمجھا اور اس کو مانا نہیں. تو یہ کیونکہ حق ہی اللہ تعالیٰ کے پاس ہے، اس وجہ سے یہ جو دوسری جگہ ہے وہاں پہ ہم یہ نہیں کہہ سکتے کہ یہ تکفیر جو ہے وہ یعنی پیغمبر بھی کر سکتا ہے، لیکن پیغمبر وہ کرے گا خدا کے بہاف پہ. لیکن جب پیغمبر موجود نہیں ہوگا پھر تو یہ سرے سے نہیں ہو سکتی. اللہ تعالیٰ تکفیر جب کرتے ہیں تو براہ راست تو نہیں کرتے، اپنے پیغمبر کے ذریعے سے کرتے ہیں. تو یہ جب بھی ہوگی ایک پیغمبر کی موجودگی میں ہی ہوگی، اور ہو گئی ہے جب پیغمبر تو رخصت ہو گئے ہیں اب. اس وجہ سے اب صرف اس کو ایک ہم بیان کے طور پہ پڑھ سکتے ہیں کہ جو لوگ آج بھی اس فعل کے مرتکب ہوں گے وہ پھر آخرت میں خداوند تعالیٰ ان کے ساتھ وہی معاملہ کرے گا کہ جو کفار کے ساتھ کیا جاتا ہے.
لیکن ہم سر یہ دیکھتے ہیں کہ نبی صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم کے بعد محدثین نے بھی بعض لوگوں پر متعین طریقے پر فاسق ہونے کا اور کاذب ہونے کا اور اس طرح سے مختلف
یہ تو آپ
معاملات
کو
میں
محدثین سے
متعین
پوچھنا
کیا.
چاہیے. دیکھیے ہم تو اس وقت قرآن سے چل رہے ہیں نا. اگر محدثین کوئی بات کرتے ہیں تو ان کی دلیل کو دیکھیں گے، دلیل پہ غور کریں گے اور دلیل کا جواب دیں گے. ان کی آپ کوئی دلیل ہے تو وہ پیش کیجیے.
Thank you. Ammar Rasool, please go ahead.
تھینک یو ویری مچ جی. السلام علیکم ڈاکٹر صاحب.
وعلیکم السلام.
Dr. Saab, मैंने जो है वो I wanted to ask this question. I had this question in my mind for some time. There is this ayat in the Quran which is from chapter 17 and verse 74 and 75. And if I can read the translation for it, it says, "Had we not made you steadfast, you probably would have inclined to them a little. And we truly would have made you taste double the punishment both in this life and after death, and you would have found no helper against us." इसके अंदर खास तौर पे जो पहली आयत है डॉक्टर साहब, वो that seems like a very strict or
Harsh.
tough rebuke for the prophet, where literally it is being said that you had become very weak and you had inclined to them if he had not sort of like helped you in that moment. I have this question in my mind कि एक तो ये कि ये किस मोमेंट की बात की जा रही है? Is this a moment in the prophet's life जहाँ पे actually उनका ईमान बहुत कमजोर हो गया था? Is this what the Quran is saying, खुदा ना खास्ता? And how is that possible?
Your question is clear. Your question is very clear. So, you see, there is this certain feature of Quranic Arabic that has to be understood in order to appreciate this style. And I have, I think, taught a course on this which relates to stylistics of the Quran. And in that course, I have shown that there are several verses, not only the one that you pointed out, but there are many other verses in which seemingly you find very, very harsh words for the Prophet. In fact, there is something even more harsher in Surah Haqqa, which says that if you concoct something on my behalf, this is what the Almighty telling the Prophet, لَأَخَذْنَا مِنْهُ بِالْيَمِينَ, and we will catch you by our strong hand, and لَقَطَعْنَا مِنْهُ الْوَتِينَ, and we will just cut off your life vein. So these are even stronger words you'll find in the Quran. So the thing that you need to understand here is that this is a very special style of the Quran, and we do also adopt it in our own lives, in which you actually are not addressing the person who is in front of you. The purpose is to deflect your address to someone else. But because you would like that other person to have some more time and respite so that that person can think, you don't address those harsh words to him. And you actually talk to someone who is dear to you, and you talk to that person in a manner as if you're scolding him, but the direction of that rebuke is towards that person. Imagine your own son, if he's doing something bad, if he's sitting in some bad company, and for example, his friends are also present, and you'd like to tell them that, well, this is not good company. So instead of, for example, addressing those friends who are there, because they might feel embarrassed, and some of them might have the inclination to mend their ways. So what you do is you ask your son and say, why do you go to such people? These people are evil. You should stay put and you should concentrate on your studies. So you see, what happens is that you are actually telling those people who are to be told that such is the nature of what you want, that you'd not like your son to sit in that bad company, and there are people who might be instrumental in taking your son away from the right path, or maybe not letting him concentrate on your studies. And in this way, they get that indirect call as well, and they might be chastened by that. So in a very similar way, this is what we do in our own lives. The Quran also does this, that at times it does not address the people who need to be scolded, because it does not want to expose them fully. It wants to give them an opportunity and another chance. Especially there are people who at times they understand that they are being actually addressed. But had this address been direct, it would have been very tough. And even, you see, our own psyche is such that when we get scolded in such a direct manner, we have this mechanism of self-defense, and our own ego gets the better of us. So the Quran is also a very psychological instrument of making people understand. So instead of directly talking to them, there are so many instances in which the Quran, for example, the verse that you are talking about, Zayf al-Hayat wa Zayf al-Mamat, if I don't forget are the words, that twice shall you be punished. So basically this is a message which is being given to his opponents, that such is God's ruthless law of reward and punishment, that even the Prophet is not going to be spared if he does something bad. But of course, this is not something which is telling you that there was a chance that the Prophet might go astray, or that he would be deserving twice that punishment. All this rebuke is directed towards them, that look here, this is the stern nature of our law, and no one is going to be spared from that stern nature. And So you better understand that if the Prophet is not going to be spared for this, then who are you? I mean, you are going to suffer even more. So you see, it's like a deflected address. And as I said, if I've tried to explain it, but if you would like some more details, again, I would refer you to that course that I've taught on how we actually find these verses in the Quran and how in our own lives we do such things.
Dr. Saab, if I can be if I can be allowed a follow up
Of course.
question on
Right.
this,
Right.
I understand your reply very well, and it's very well put, sir, where you're saying that it is a stylistic approach of the Quran to be speaking this way. But just in my heart, I feel that especially the first ayat of these two ayats seems to be, a very direct comment about something that actually might have happened. Like, if the translation is correct, and obviously it might be wrong, but I'm just quoting the English translation. Had we not made you steadfast, you probably would have inclined to them a little. If I just look at these words, they just seem to be saying to me that, the God
I
of the Quran
understand.
is.
You see, you have to understand this. When God says that, had we not made you steadfast, what does this mean? It actually means that the Prophet had this inclination and this initiative to be steadfast. So the Almighty doesn't make people steadfast out of his own force, or does not forcefully do that. He gives this patience, this resolve to people who ask for it, who actually act upon it, and who deserve it. So if even if this is considered the way you have, then also we have to understand that this steadfastness is not something which is God given. It is actually earned by the Prophet, and as a result, God said that, okay, had you not earned this steadfastness, which as a result I have given you, you might have inclined yourself towards these people. And I think this is a perfectly natural thing. I mean, a prophet is also a human being, and resolve and perseverance is something that he requires for himself. So if he has this ability to persevere on matters, so God actually helps the Prophet in making him more patient and more steadfast. So basically, it's something that he has. I mean, yes, it's God's mercy as well, but it's something which is potentially first there in the Prophet, and then the Almighty cemented it or strengthened it.
बहुत clear, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And the links to the playlists for understanding the Quran series and also the analytical study of the Quran series is going to be in the chat soon. So keep a lookout for that. Mushtaba Azam, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Sir, to which extent do I need to go deep down into the matters of a company, being a sleeping partner of a company, because I do not know what is going inside? So if I do not go deep down inside, then my earning, apparently that seems to be a halal business. So my earning would be halal. And if another company is not registered with the law of land, then I think if law of land is not abided, this is against Islamic law as well. Then this act of not abiding is haram, or the entire earning would be haram. So these are two questions.
The earning would not be haram at all. I mean, the earning itself relates to the way in which you earn. However, what you can say is that your company is doing something which is in violation of the law. So that violation should be punished, or would be punished by God, maybe, or people who are responsible for that will be punished. If not in this world, because you see, they can also be caught and taken to the law. If not here, then of course, in both cases in the hereafter as well. But the earning cannot be regarded as haram. It is, the only thing is that there is a procedural violation that has taken place. That procedural violation shall be dealt with separately.
Okay, then being a sleeping partner, how much can I go deep down? Because apparently statute says that this is halal. So if it is indulging in something haram, is it my responsibility?
If on the face of it you are, you're told that the business is halal and you're reasonably sure about it, then your responsibility is as far as this. If they now do something which is not in the ambit of halal, then they are responsible.
Okay, can I ask one more question? Very small and short.
Go ahead.
And that is, if a person, for example, to be very explicit, if a person is an assistant commissioner, he has so many responsibilities, but the law says he can sit in the office for 1500 hours. but his work is so much that he has to sit for more hours and things like this. Can he skip this one out? Because if he skips, his job will not be done. But law says he can sit only for three. Matlab, how can he uh, get to the work-life balance? Work-life balance is disturbed if he sits for he takes the meeting at night as well. And so, what is the ruling of Islam over here?
I mean, this is not a ruling as much from Islam that is needed as much as the norms and the style of work that we are used to in various countries. If the norm is such that this is something which is happening, and it is also known to your superiors that this is how things are, because there are certain things which are written in the book, and then there are certain things which are done practically. So if it is a known thing, you're not doing some violation secretly, or something which is, not brought to your, not known to your superiors, and you are able to justify whatever you're doing, not only before your conscience, but also before your superiors. And I think there is this chance that you can go ahead. So I think it's like a situation in which you need to decide yourself that you are trying to do your best without violating any rights, and at the same time you're not doing something by hiding whatever you're doing. And you know, when people know, especially the people that you're answerable to, that you're doing something for the benefit of the collective good.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Noshat Shafkat. Please go ahead. And for those of you who have already asked questions, you will be put forth, if you're raising your hand again, you'll be put in the second round of questions in case we have time. So Noshat Shafkat, please go ahead.
Yes, Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Sahab. Dr. Sahab, with regard to the animals being caged, I tend to agree with what you say, but then suddenly it comes to mind Surah Kahf, where the dog was kept in a cave, and Surah Baqarah, where pet dogs are allowed to hound the prey for you and catch a hold of it before you reach there, and you can do the zabiha after that, and they become halal. How would you explain that, sir? Thank you.
So I think we need to understand that the environment in which the Quran is speaking of is more of the tribal culture that was prevalent there. In Surah Kahf, he was not caged at all. Actually, he was sitting outside the cave, which means that he was just guarding them. He was protecting them. So dogs which are meant for protection, and for that matter, any animal which is meant for protection, in tribal cultures, and even today in many rural cultures, they have a very vast field in which they can play about or run about. It is mostly in urban cultures in which we have zoological gardens, for example, zoos and other animal habitats in which they are caged in an artificial habitat which is not closer to their original habitat. So I think my concern is more of principal concern, and I think that we need to understand that as far as dogs are concerned, or any other animal is concerned, for our own protection, then that animal too has to be kept in a way that that its own personal life in any way is not sacrificed for our own cause. I can tell you that there are instances in which these shepherd dogs and these home dogs, they are doing a wonderfully great job because they help elderly people. Personally, I witnessed a dog doing some work for an elderly lady. She once asked that dog that go and fetch me that medicine, and believe me, that dog went and he actually brought that particular medicine that was sitting on a shelf, exactly the same medicine that she had asked. And there were several other things that dog would do for that old lady. So I think, and that dog would be, by the way, living in the house with her, and she was properly attending to her the way she would act, even attend to her own grandchild, maybe. So I think if such affection is provided, that such animals, which especially if they are pets, they live in your own home and they are properly trained and also properly educated at the same time, and you look after them in the way that you look after your own children, then I'd see no harm. But I was specifically talking about the zoological gardens and the zoos and other areas in which you basically keep animals for your own entertainment and amusement, and they don't have any service to do. So dogs
Right,
which have a service to do, they are always being they are generally looked after well by their masters.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. We have a question in the chat that asks, Why does God put his prophets in trials and tribulations when they are chosen by him for spreading his message? There are many instances in the Quran where prophets are tortured, and our last prophet Muhammad had to go through so much just to spread God's message. And that's the case with normal Muslims too. So why does God want us to beg in front of him for the tests and trials created and sent by him? Why does God derive so much pleasure in torturing his slaves in the guise of tests and tribulations? How can a person worship such God with love?
Actually, we need to change our mindset when we're studying these trials and tribulations, whether they belong to our prophets of God, whether they belong to us as human beings. Because yes, at times they do seem very, very tough, very, very severe, very, very harsh. But you see, the Almighty has given us this clue that basically these trials are not meant per se. They are not meant to torture us. They're not meant to put us into difficulty, but they are meant to test our mettle. And there are a number of reasons which make these trials beneficial for us. For example, at times, because of these trials, we become tough individuals from our own inner self. I think all of us know that whenever we pass through a trial, especially a tough trial, when we come out of that trial, we feel stronger than before. So it's like becoming a stronger person. So at times, these trials are meant to make you even stronger so that you can face opposition, especially in the cases of messengers of God, even more, even more easily. So you see, remember the opposition which these messengers of God faced. It was enormous. It was not something normal. So in order to have that resolve and steadfastness to face that opposition and that animosity, they needed to be tough as well. So that toughness is often created not through a life of luxury or comfort, but through a life of trial and test, in which when you pass through these tests, your inner being becomes stronger. This is one, for example, wisdom which is shown in the Quran. Another one is that these trials, they are able to bring you closer to God. So you see, you might be in a position that you are connecting to God, but you're not that strongly connected. So what trials do, they make you remember God even more minutely, even more consistently. So we take them as a challenge. We have that positive vibes drawn from these trials, that they are actually making us instrumental in bringing us closer to God. And then thirdly, of course, the Almighty also wants us to see that, well, we are always thanking Him in good times. How do we behave when we are faced with these adverse currents in these in these difficult circumstances? So that is a test of our gratitude as well. To see that if we are passing through a trial, then remember it is something which God wants to see and know whether my servant, whether my creature, whether my person is going to be someone who is going to still be lifted and thank him for what he has instead of grumbling on what he doesn't have. So see, all these trials have a very special place in our life. They make us combat adverse currents, as I said, even better than before. They bring us closer to God. They make us realize that God is someone who is going to reward us. Because you see, if you want to receive more reward for that windfall gain, you have to do something out of the ordinary. So the more you are patient and steadfast in these trials, the more will be your reward as well. So it's like an opportunity to gain more reward from the Almighty as well. So if you look at these trials through this vision or through this approach, I would say that you'll realize that these trials are a blessing for all of us.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. The next question asks that there is a hadith where Prophet Muhammad said that there was a person who never fought in jihad and did not desire jihad in his heart, but then he died a death of hypocrisy. Could you please explain this hadith?
I need to look at that hadith. I mean, you need to send me the text, because you see, hadith literature is fraught with so many narratives, and especially the narrative in which some incident is mentioned. We need to look at it from all angles, because at times one book reports just one angle, and you'll find another narration of the same event giving us some more complete picture. So unless I'm able to look at that narrative in more detail, I cannot comment on it. You can
Then
send it to
I'd
me,
recommend-
I can give you an opinion.
Thank you. I'd recommend that participant to send me the hadith, and then I'll forward it to Dr. Saleem. Iqra, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. Sir, my question is while living in a European country, if we work in a restaurant where some pork based items are served or non halal meat and sometimes alcohol, so there are two conditions. If we work and if we buy and we work as an employer, and does the serving of alcohol make some variation? I mean, it's inclusion or exclusion. Does it make difference, or is it same pork and alcohol?
So prohibited items, whether it's alcohol, whether it's pork, whether it's any other thing, I mean, if you are collaborating in any way, that should be avoided as much as possible. And such jobs should only be done when you have no other option and there's no other way out. And if you think that there is no other way out, then I mean, this is one thing that you can decide under compulsion, out of necessity. But generally, it is better to avoid such jobs. But I think it's easier said than done, because in some societies, especially in Europe, I know that it is very difficult to find an alternative job. So until the time you're not able to find an alternative job, it's like doing something out of compulsion, out of necessity, and hopefully you'll be forgiven for that. And all that you can maybe do some more is that maybe you can give some of the earning that you do in charity, so that it could compensate in a way, so that some of your earning is given back to the society. That could be a way of compensating it. But the best thing would be that if you could look for some alternative.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Rafia Khwaja, please go ahead.
Dr. Shehzad. Dr. Shehzad, the Prophet prohibited slavery, but slavery continued for quite some time, and donkeys were kept because they misunderstood the ayats of the Quran. And if I'm not wrong, wasn't slavery finally abolished in 1962 in Saudi Arabia?
Yes, that is correct.
So how do we explain this? That we say slavery was finished, but
So
it was never
I think
finished.
that we need to understand that people act according to their understanding. And to us, or to me, and to many of my colleagues and some of the teachers that I've studied with, it was very explicit that the Quran had proscribed it and prohibited it, and that should not have been practiced in any way. But you see, this is always a matter of understanding. Other people who are in vast majority, they thought that the Quran is actually not prohibiting it, and it is allowing it in a certain way. So it persisted after that. So I think we need to understand that God does not implement His directive by force. It leaves it to people to understand and then act according to it. And because these understandings can be different for different people, so it can continue like that. And unfortunately, not only in the case of slavery, but also I think I'd like to remind you that in another very grave directive of the Quran, which was practiced by the Prophet and by his rightly guided caliphs, the first four caliphs, it was practiced very much, but later on it was also consigned to oblivion. And I'm referring to the directive of electing people through your own free will, which we today call democracy. So religion, or Islam, or the Quran, in fact, was the foremost proponent of democracy, and in its own words, it calls it as shura, and it says that no one has the right to rule except people who vote someone to power who actually are in majority. And this is something which the Prophet, right after him, Abu Bakr, Umar, Usman, and Ali all practiced. It was only after Ali that we find that this institution of shura, or democracy, was overturned into a monarchy, and that monarchy, from the times of Caliph Ali, right up to 1924, when Ataturk actually annulled the caliphate, it remained in the form of a monarchy, in spite of the Quran telling us to the contrary. So you see, it is all a matter of understanding that that has resulted into this. So just as democracy was flouted, similarly this directive was also flouted. But remember that this is my interpretation, or maybe your interpretation, that it was flouted. But the people who were following it, they never thought that this was, they were doing it against the wishes of the Quran or dictates of the Quran. They thought they were doing it in accordance with it. So you see, this happens, and I think that we need to understand that this is how the Almighty has made this world, that as long as we are not insincere, as long as we don't do something willfully wrong, if we do something out of our own sincerity and it might be actually wrong, then the Almighty is not going to take us to task. Yes, of course, the results might not be good, might not be congruous, but remember, it's the intention that people have before it. So I do think that it was certainly something which was wrong, that it should have been done away with right after the rightly guided caliphate, the way they did so. And that's what I can say. But unfortunately, a vast majority of people and our scholars thought that this is not the case, and Islam has allowed slavery.
But Dr. Shehzad, they were Arabic-speaking people, and how did they misunderstand Surah Marriage and Surah Memu and thought that laundries, it meant that the laundries were allowed when they were strictly forbidden?
So
How
remember
did the
this.
word laundries get misunderstood?
So you see, remember that in spite of being people who are Arabic speaking, they had a huge backlog, a huge inheritance of slaves, which I mean, it's not that they had them in the times of the Prophet. There were scores and scores of slaves which lived in societies, and they were, I mean, they were there. So there is this push of the society at times, because of which you are not able to clearly think about certain things. And I mean, this does happen with human beings. So I think this is a human error that we need to understand, that can take place with the brightest of individuals, even the brightest minds. So even the brightest of minds, they can make an error of understanding, and I think this is what has happened.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. We'll take one more chat question and then we'll begin our second round of questions. However, we're closing into our end time, so if we don't get through to all questions, inshallah, join the next Islam study circle that we'll have and you could ask your questions there. So this chat question asks, if a lady is going through perimenopause and is experiencing spotting on and off on a daily basis, does one need to take the full shower every time to perform prayers?
I think the best thing would be to consult your own gynecologist or your own doctor, and if the doctor tells you that this spotting is because of the regular or the irregular period, or maybe the period which is now about to go away, then you should, of course, abstain from praying, because that would mean that you're not that you have been given this concession that you should not pray. So basically, it's the decision that you should you should take after consulting your doctor.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. Ammar Rasul, please go ahead.
Thank you very much once again. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Sahib. The political situation, these days with regards to Gaza and Israel, there are these, verses which speak about sort of like certain historical texts, and I wouldn't want to read out all verses, because there are 4 or 5 verses, but I'm sure that this is chapter 17, verse 4, and we warn the children of Israel in the scripture, you will certainly cause corruption in the land twice, and you will become extremely arrogant. And then it goes on, the verses go on to describe what will happen the first time that they do it and the second time that they do it. My question is, are these verses referring to things that are still going to happen, or they have already happened? And if so, do we know what particular instances they are referring to?
No, these are 2 instances which actually have already happened, and they have happened much earlier in history, and they happened after the Temple of Solomon was built around about 950 BC. We know that once the temple was built and the Israelites were given this position of bearing witness to the truth, they ultimately their moral stance declined. Morally, they became corrupt. They indulged in a lot of polytheism, and as a result of which, in 586 BC, there was this huge attack that took place on their temple. And the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar was his name. He came and he utterly destroyed the temple that was made by Solomon. So this is the first instance which you have just referred to, because the Quran says that twice will they raise their head and twice will they be punished. So the first instance was in 586 BC when Nebuchadnezzar actually attacked the temple and totally ravaged it and razed it to the ground. And he enslaved these Israelites, and they were taken out. And then later Cyrus the Great, the Persian king, he had them liberated. They came back, and under Herod the Great, who was a Jewish Roman emperor, they were able to build that temple once again. And this is what we call the second temple. And once this second temple was built, once again these Israelites, they fell into moral decline, and once again they indulged in polytheism and in prostitution and many other evil habits. And once again they were punished. And this time, this was in 70 AD when the Roman Emperor Titus attacked them, and he once again totally ravaged the second temple. And ever since that time, we find that the temple is no longer there, and just one wall, which is called the Wailing Wall, is left intact, and it is still there. And most Jews believe that the Messiah, which they are waiting for, will come later in time, and he is going to build that third temple wherever that second temple is now. Because it's not fully constructed, we just have one wall. He's going to come. In fact, there are two narrations. One of them says that the temple will be constructed first sometime, and then the Messiah would come. And there is another view which says that, well, the Messiah will come and then he'll build the temple. So basically, this is the history of the Israelites, the way it has been narrated in the Quran. These first two instances have been narrated in the Quran, and they have already happened. As far as the construction of the third temple is concerned, or the temple construction the third time, this is not something which the Quran says about. This is the popular view of the Jews, and that is why they are very, very emotional about having the land of Israel for themselves, because they think that the last battle or the last frontier of humankind is that their Messiah is going to come and he's going to establish his rule. So they think that they need Israel, that land, for themselves, so that the person comes, the Messiah comes, and he is able to establish his rule. So this is the religious view. Other than that, we also know that there's a political tangent or a political bent to this whole situation, which has its own pulls and pushes, I would say, and that varies from one to the other. But the thing is that if you look at some of their statements which they give, and how, of course, we can think that they justify these large-scale killings and this carnage, especially women and children. So they stated the statement, or they stated, I would say, stance which they give is that they say that when they are just retaliating what Hamas had done initially. So Hamas was the first to give their attack, and once they attacked civilians, they are now just replying or retaliating. Yes, when they are retaliating, they have gone far ahead than just mere retaliation. But then when they have been asked on this and in the national press, their answer has been that if they are attacking hospitals and places which are vulnerable, for example, which can have children, then this is because the Palestinians are using these hospitals as human shields. And they say that there are control rooms below these hospitals and these places where women and children are staying. And the control rooms are below these hospitals and these places, from where they are actually monitoring the whole fight and the whole war. So they justify these attacks through this statement. Whether it's true or not, I'm not sure about it. But this is how they say in world press. So my answer, as I said, is that as far as the religious aspect is concerned, those punishments which are mentioned in Surah Bani Israel, the 17th Surah, they actually refer to their history in the past. And what they are doing today has both these rings with them. First, they would like the land of Israel so that the temple could be built again. And second, the current scenario has resulted because of a skirmish, because of an initiative or a militant attack by the Hamas. And their retaliation is basically just an answer. And I do say, yes, that answer has gone way beyond the act of retaliation. But then they say that this retaliation is because the Palestinians are using these hospitals as human shields.
Ahmed Qasim, please go ahead.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम सर। सर ये मेरा ताल्लुक मर्द औरत के इक्वालिटी से रिलेटेड है। गांधी साहब का एक वीडियो देखे थे तो उन्होंने समझाया कि इस्लाम में मर्द और औरत इक्वल है, शादी के इंस्टीट्यूशन में जो ये दिखता है, ये दरअसल मर्द औरत के दरमियान इनइक्वालिटी नहीं है, ये एक डिग्री ऑफ अथॉरिटी के दरमियान इनइक्वालिटी है। जो हेड होगा वो जाहिर सी बात है वो कंट्रोल करेगा। तो फिर मेरा सवाल ये है, क्या एक मैरिटल रिलेशनशिप में हस्बैंड और वाइफ मिलकर ये म्यूचुअल एग्रीमेंट कर सकते हैं कि हस्बैंड की सारी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी वाइफ की होगी, इन द एट द सेम टाइम वाइफ को हायर डिग्री ऑफ अथॉरिटी मिल जाएगी और हस्बैंड जो होगा वो उसके ताबेदार होगा? कैन इट हैपन?
Well,
Thank you.
the question that you asked relates to to the system of family, in fact, and that is that according to religion or Islam, it prescribes that the husbands should be the head of the family. But your question says that what if because of some mutual agreement between the two, this position of authority is granted to the wife instead of the husband. So my answer would be yes, this is something that can be done through mutual agreement. And if they think that the responsibilities with the husband is supposed to discharge, the wife can do so. That can be done. But remember, the prescription or the guidance which the Quran has given us is that men have been accorded this role because they are temperamentally more suitable for this, and because on them rests the responsibility of earning for the whole family. So this is the philosophy of making husbands as the head. So, if anyone has to go against this philosophy, then they should have a very good reason to do that.
Thank you
सर
very
मेरा
much.
सवाल भी यही है कि अगर वाइफ अर्निंग की भी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी ले लेती है, बोलती है कि अब हम सब करेंगे, हम ही हेड रहेंगे, और हस्बैंड बोलता है ठीक है तुम, I'll obey you, in that sense, कि क्या
So
ऐसा हो
remember,
सकता है?
the Quran has not just said that obeying or being the head of the family is subject to earning for the family. That is just one condition. The Quranic words are "Ar-rijalu qawwamuna 'ala an-nisa bima faddala Allahu ba'dahum 'ala ba'd wa bima anfaqu min amwalihim." So it states two reasons. One is bima faddala Allahu ba'dahum 'ala ba'd, which means that one is more blessed in matters of authority over the other. One is more responsible, one is more temperamentally, psychologically, and physically suitable. So even if the wife takes up this responsibility of earning, the second condition which the Quran has said is that men or husbands, they are more suitable temperamentally and physiologically for this position. So someone has to answer this also. So unless the husband, out of any exception, also ends up a person who is, he could be someone who is severely lacking in these male attributes which are generally found, then of course this exception maybe can be entertained. Otherwise, as I said, generally the Quran says that as the male gender and as husbands, they are suitable. Bima faddalallahu ba'dahum ala ba'd actually tells us that in this matter they are much more suitable and blessed to carry out this responsibility. So it's like something which is biologically found in them.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Salman Nassar, please go ahead. And that will be our last question of the day since we're out of time.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम सर।
वालेकुम अस्सलाम।
मेरा सवाल ये है कि कुरान में भी और हदीस में भी अक्सर जगह पर ये आता है कि ऐसा होगा, मुस्तकबिल की पेशन गोई होती है, जैसे कि सूरह बनी इसराइल में 2 बार कहा कि तुम फसाद करोगे, और इसी तरह हदीसों में आता है कि तुम्हारे इतने फिरके बन जाएंगे या कोई और इस तरह की बात होती है। तो सर मेरी सेंस ये कहती है कि ये तनबीहात के लिए होता है, लेकिन अमूमन जब मैं लोगों से बात करती हूँ, इवन कोई आलिमा भी होती हैं, वो भी बात करती हैं, तो वो कहती है कि नहीं, ऐसा कह दिया है तो ऐसा होगा। तो सर मुझे नहीं समझ आती ये बात कि ये चीजें तो हमें मतलब बचने के लिए बताई जा रही होती है ना, कि अगर सपोज 72 फिरके बनेंगे तो हमें फिरकों से परहेज करना चाहिए, हमें उनके साथ शामिल नहीं होना चाहिए। अल्लाह ताला ये भी तो कहते हैं। सर इसको थोड़ा सा एक्सप्लेन करें तो मुझे समझ आएगा।
So you see, it depends on a case-to-case basis. There are certain directives in which the nature or the statement of the directive is such that they are just meant to warn you, they are just meant to prepare you and to caution you. And there could be other directives in which the scope of that directive is that the things are going to actually happen the way they are destined to happen. So it all depends. I cannot give a blanket statement. If you can give an example, I can relate it to either of these two alternatives. But I think it's not. It's not like a given that it's always a form of a warning. It's always in the form of a precautionary measure. Sometimes there are happenings as well. But then, as I said, they relate to specific examples.
सर बनी इसराइल में कहा है ना कि 2 बार फसाद करोगे, तो जब 2 बार फसाद करोगे तो इसका मतलब ये कि उन्हें बचना चाहिए था ना फसाद करने से, और
Of
तो
course.
हम तुम्हें
Right. So this is what they were told, that they were warned that they would do. So the warning was meant for them to stop. And we know from the Bible itself that in the first scenario there were prophets who were sent, and they warned them that this is going to happen if you don't do this. Similarly, in the case of the second disorder, which the Quran talks about, Jesus specially told them that they should beware of themselves. But they not only did not listen to him, they went as far as to try to kill him and crucify him. So yes, the prophets had warned them. So it is like the Quran telling them that if you don't pay heed to the warnings of these prophets of God, this is what is going to happen.
जी सर, यही मकसद है मेरा भी, और यही हम मुसलमान भी कर रहे हैं सर, कि अगर हम अल्लाह की बात को नहीं सुनेंगे तो हमारे साथ भी यही होगा जो बनी इसराइल के साथ हुआ था.
Right.
थैंक यू.
Right.
Thank you very much to all the participants for coming here today with your very curious questions. And thank you, Dr. Saleem, for taking the time to answer all of our questions. I've posted a link to a WhatsApp group in the chat. With this group, if you join this group, you can get weekly updates on the sessions. And so for those questions that we couldn't get to today due to the lack of time, please join the next Islam Study Circle, where you if time remains, you could ask your questions then. Or wait until the first Saturday of the upcoming month, so February, to join the session again and ask your questions. So, inshallah, see you tomorrow, Dr. Saleem, with another session of textual study of the Quran. And Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.